Welcome to another edition of Talk Dragon Ball Resurrection, the long-form discussion podcast here on Geekdom 101, where we discuss more of the deeper aspects of Dragon Ball in a round table format. So I'm joined by three beautiful guests today and myself, and we're going to be talking about Saiyan Pride, not just Vegeta's pride from back in the day in Z, Super, and kind of the meaning behind it, because there's a lot of confusion among people about what it actually means. And I think some people think they know what it means, but it doesn't really mean what they think it means. So we're going to go into that here today on this video and how it affects the history of this franchise. I mean, I say Vegeta because he's the character that uses that phrase more than anybody. It's associated with him the most, but it does kind of bleed into other characters as well. So let me go ahead and introduce the round table here. I'm going to start with Anand from Anime Hunch, who's right there. Say hello.
Yo guys, what's up? Good to have you here.
And where can they find you at, bro?
Yes, you can find me on animehunch.com as Anand Garcin. On Twitter, you can find me as the username Garcin the Sage and Nerd. I post on threads once in a while, so check me out there.
And if you've been on the streams that we do after every manga chapter, he's usually there, most of the time, if his internet's not crapping out on him. So also we have Jordan, the dragon, right over here. What's up? Where can they find you? Say hello.
You can find me on Twitter under Jordan Lee. You can find me on YouTube under it's Jordan the Dragon Lee.
Wait, Jordan Lee is your Twitter? I thought it was Jordan L and then your last name.
Jordan Lee Durham. That's my hashtag, but that's my tag. But you can find me if you type in Jordan Lee on Google.
Bro, you look like you're in space already, bro. And that's good. I'm going to be in space in about 30 minutes. Anyways, also joining us here, please welcome JD with the degrees. Not the one that doesn't have the degrees. It's a different guy. This dude right down here, bro. Say hello.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Where can they find you at, bro?
So my YouTube handle is JD with the degrees. I think typing it in JD or JD55513 brings it up. And then my Twitter handle is creative_115, I believe. But if you type in
55513 like your old zip code?
JD55513 was the old YouTube original name, and so sometimes when you type up my name, because I changed it after Emish nicknamed me that, it still pops up like that's in the URL. So.
Okay, but I'm saying, is the 555 thing, is that your old zip code? Like, where'd those numbers come from?
Bro, it was back in the day, when you first make a PlayStation Network ID, I just chose some, JD references my first and last name, and then 55513. I just pulled it out of the hat.
The truth is the combination on his luggage. He just don't want you to know. That's what it really is. So we're talking about Saiyan Pride today, and that has a lot of different aspects to it. So I want to first of all open up, because really we got to talk about Vegeta, because he's like the guy who, he's not the first prideful character ever in the series, but he's the guy who is always talking about pride. Now, I've got a video coming out later this year. We're going to be discussing Vegeta in detail and his arc and what he means, but I think people misunderstand Vegeta when he says, I have pride or this and that. First of all, we got to get this out of the way off the hop, okay? A lot of folks don't even understand what pride and ego actually means. There's a lot to this, okay? Pride and ego, people think that when you have pride and when you have ego, it means you're arrogant. And sometimes that is the case, but not always. And there's oftentimes a bit of confusion amongst the fandom and just people online about the difference between Eastern philosophy's version of pride and Western philosophy's version of pride, and how they kind of mesh together. Because I think when people look at Vegeta, especially if you grew up watching Z on Toonami, you might think of him as just being this prideful dude, and he is prideful, but he's not prideful in the way that people think he's prideful. He's prideful from a purely egotistical, selfish way. However, Goku also exhibits some egotistical examples as well. So I'm going to start with JD here. Go ahead and explain to us the difference between Eastern and Western pride, and then I want to go to Anand because he's actually in the East, so he can elaborate on this more. So go for it.
So whenever we talk about really anything when we talk about the psychology of stuff, metaphysics, ethics, aesthetics, even art, any kind of thing that relates to a person's culture, you have to look at it from their paradigm, their way of thinking. And so when people read Dragon Ball or watch it, we're watching it on Toonami or Cartoon Network or Funimation or whatever, right? And these are Western outlets on Western channels, right? And so most of us are brought up in a culture that's the Western, right? A lot of Christianity, a lot of of the Abrahamic religion, a lot of that kind of stuff is just ingrained into our culture. So when we read or watch Dragon Ball, we're adopting it or looking at it from that lens, just like on a normal level. You just don't even realize it. That's why in the original dub, people got that Superman, Jesus kind of Messiah when looking at Goku, his entire character arc throughout Z. But when we talk about things like ego, right, that's something that's rooted in psychology. Psychology was once considered a philosophy. It was mainly a philosophy because at the time we didn't have the tools and advancements in biology, chemistry, and neuroscience to make it a legitimate science. So for a long time back in the West, you have people like Carl Jung, you have people like Sigmund Freud,
Sigmund
and other
Freud.
thinkers.
That's the big
Yes,
one.
you had a lot of these thinkers who had studied, who were the pioneers of what would be known as psychology. But you know where they got it from? A lot of their methodology, the way they thought about those things, especially the ego, came from looking at the East, the way Oriental philosophy had been set up, because they had answers for those things. They had doctrines, sutras, books of which that were written extensively and had very little change. There are schools of thought, right? So, if you take any philosophy class, whether it's in high school or college, you'll learn about different schools of thought concerning certain things. There's an Aristotelian tradition, referencing Aristotle. There's a Platonist tradition referencing Plato, right? The two biggest Western thinkers back in the day. And there's a plethora of similar treads of thought that you'll see. But in the East, it's not like that. There's slight different derivatives of things related to Buddhism, Jainism, Confucianism, Shintoism, and Taoism. But for the most part, those philosophies, those methods of thought have remained the same. They haven't gone through the big revolutions that science has gone through in the West, because science is a very important tradition in our society, our culture. Obviously, the Eastern people, they believe in science, they subscribe to that, but a lot of their culture has remained the same. It's been untouched by a lot of the Western hegemony, as they call it, a system of dominance. Because the West, wherever we go, we impart our culture onto others. But the Chinese, the Japanese, a lot of them have remained as they have been. They've gone through some revisions here and there, but for the most part, a lot of their beliefs about things like consciousness, ego, how to be an effective member of society, all that kind of stuff, all those questions that you would have, that we always think about, and there's been different interpretations. For them, their answers are always in the past, because those thinkers have influenced them up until present day. So in regards to ego, again, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, a lot of their ideas about ego come from the Eastern tradition. In regards to, you were saying the Saiyan Pride.
Well, I was asking about like the
Oh, oh,
you wanted to explain the difference between Eastern and Western, like the backstory is appreciated, but I mean like their perspectives. I think when people say the word like pride, they think it's a negative or like ego. First of all, everybody has a fucking ego. Every human being on the planet has an ego, because if you don't have an ego, that means you don't have any sort of sense of survival. And
Yeah.
no matter what your religion may be, it doesn't matter. When we're put on this planet, we have a survival. We're basically our number one instinctual way of living is to survive under the best possible conditions and to replicate, aka have babies. Like that's what we're here to do from a purely scientific perspective, right? So because of that, yes, you were saying something?
Yeah, you have to make selfish decisions in order to survive, and that's
Yes.
basically what your ego is. It's just it's your biology telling you that you need to make this decision in order to survive,
Yeah.
like
Even
or
if it's
thrive or multiply or whatever. It's a part. It is an instinct. It within
yeah.
itself is an instinct. It's just a different type of instinct compared to something like intuition, which intuition is much more what you would think of if you were thinking of Goku. Goku's a very intuitive character. He relies on his intuition more than he does, his like the ego aspect of his nature. Intuition or ego are kind of looked at as two sides of a coin, and that's what makes the idea of ego so fascinating, because I mean it even kind of explains why Vegeta kind of looks like a caveman, because it's like it's like an ancient primary function that we have in order to survive.
Yeah, and it's automated. It's autonomous, as they say. So like, yeah, and so like it's one of those things where everybody has one form of an ego, and I think the word egotistical, like, I think that word is used to describe people who are very arrogant and very selfish. But at the end of the day, when it comes to surviving, especially if you look at things like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're going to do whatever you need to do to survive. If it's you and your family and you see somebody who has food and you're starving, you might knock them out or rob them. And I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. Sometimes your instincts and your survival mechanisms will override what is logical and what is even lawful. And that to me has always been interesting, because I feel like a lot of people are hypocritical as hell, and they're very judgmental when, if they were put in those positions, they do the exact same damn thing, especially with how the world's become on social media. It's all fake. People have this moral compass that in some cases is probably a part of who they are, but if they're faced with a specific reality or a specific consequence or a problem, that morality goes out the window if you have to survive. And that's really the instinct part of ego. And that's what I think the difference is, that I think the Asians have adopted this as part of their reality. This is kind of how it is. Anand, can you elaborate on Eastern Pride versus Western Pride, and how it relates to Vegeta's character in Dragon Ball Z? Not Super, I just want to focus on Z right now.
Right. So the concept of ego or pride, when it comes to, because they're kind of interchangeable to some extent, but the word ego, as because the most of the philosophy or religions is basically rooted in Hinduism or the Vedic culture, where it explains what is the meaning of the word ego. Ego, or in Sanskrit, what it means, ahankara, it basically means I am. It is nothing which in Western people, as you mentioned, that people think that it is something negative or something to do with some kind of arrogance, but no, ego in its root meaning means I am. So now there in ego there are two forms. That is the false ego or the real ego. The false ego is basically the different identities we have associated with this material world, so to speak. That is, I'm a human, or I am born under such and such parents. I am having this kind of degree. I am this. I am the father of such and such person. I am this. Basically, associating yourself with the body, so to speak. But in actual philosophy, what he mentions more deeper in a sense, ego, who am I, is a more deeper question, which in Super is acting right now. But ego in itself actually means the spirit, soul, or Atma, so to speak. So, but when it comes to Vegeta in explaining in Dragon Ball Z, he was mentioning a Saiyan pride or ego in not in the exact deeper sense what it's been raised right now. He's been basically raising the Saiyan pride as what what did my father think as Saiyan pride? What did the ancestors think? It's not just his own version of Saiyan pride, because pride or ego is an individual characteristic for individual beings. It's not like it's a common thread for everybody. It has fundamental concepts, but the thing is, each individual identity is different for every individual. So when it comes to Vegeta talking about Saiyan pride in Z, it is more or less on the surface level. It talks about Saiyan pride, that it's a warrior race. It is they talk about my father has ruled all these planets, have conquered all these planets for long, and they talk about various topics like that. But that is the arrogance version, which many Western philosophers talk about. The arrogance part, okay, I have done this, I have popped off my pride in such a way that it causes arrogance. But real ego, once you come to the path of the divine nature, what Vegeta and Goku are in that platform right now, because they're using divine techniques, they're learning under divine masters. They are not on that same level right now where they were before. They're just talking about a superficial version of pride, so to speak, because when you go to the root version of the meaning of the word pride, the Cambridge Dictionary defines as a feeling of pleasure and satisfaction that you get because you or people connect with you, done or something good, basically. So basically it means that something, a connection with yourself or some people who have done whom you think as good. But Vegeta at that period of time has a very different definition of good, so to speak. Again, no, because his idea of good was destruction, chaos, ruling over the entire. Because he was wishing for immortality. Frieza was a hurdle. Goku was a hurdle. So he was using pride in a negative sense, in his puffing up his own arrogance so that he could rule over nature. That is the false sense of pride, which the Hindu philosophy describes it, which is false. But now what Vegeta is doing right now is something different. He's trying to go into his actual inner nature of using the word pride or saying ego, which is basically alter ego, so that he would dig deep and find out who he really is, with connection with the same race. Because in fact the instincts which is naturally coming out of him is associated with that race. So that's the difference between what Vegeta thought about Saiyan Pride at that time, which is full on arrogance, and what he thinks about right now, which is not exactly arrogance, so to speak.
No.
Well, yeah.
Jordan, go ahead. You were saying something?
Well, yeah. Well, the reason that Vegeta is considered pure evil in Dragon Ball Z
Well, he
is
said that
because
himself. That's where he got,
yeah, the reason
Yeah.
he's considered Makoto or pure evil is because he has no, like, he believes 100% that he is justified in his way of thinking. He actually believes that, he's right. He believes that what
Right.
he was taught is the gospel, so to speak. You know, he believes that he was destined to be something special. And the issue with that is as Vegeta progresses through his life, he has countless things happen to him to tell him otherwise.
right.
You know,
Constantly throughout all
pla-
of Dragon Ball Z, all the way to the Buu arc, including
yeah, Planet
dying
Vegeta.
twice.
Yeah,
Right.
Planet Vegeta is destroyed. He meets Goku. Goku completely shatters his ego multiple times.
By
Gohan
the way,
surpasses him.
you're cracking a little bit on the mic. I'm not sure why. Just letting you know.
Gohan surpasses him. He has the Android 18 wrecks him. You know what I mean? Like, he has things happen to him constantly to show that he's really not what he thought he was. And as we go into Super, he starts to feel guilt and doubt because he starts to think, well, I'm a better person now. Maybe the reason I never could reach my full potential in that era was because I'm going to have to constantly suffer for the rest of my life for believing that version of Saiyan Pride was the gospel. It was the truth. Like, maybe it wasn't. That's why he's experiencing doubt, because he's
He's questioning
questioning himself.
his entire
Right.
I guess the worldview is the word that's used in psychology.
Right.
He's questioning his whole worldview, because I oftentimes see a comment from people, and I see this a lot more than we should see it, where people say, "I wish Vegeta would just wish back Planet Vegeta and rule over them," and it's like, you don't understand Vegeta's character. No offense, you don't understand. Because multiple times in Dragon Ball, he has the opportunity to do that. He doesn't do it because it was never about the Saiyans. It was never about, like, ruling over somebody. He felt in Z, talk about Super in a minute, in Z, he felt like because since the day he was born, his father kept telling him, "You're the prince, you're special, you were born with this power level." It's basically, he's been brainwashed into
Brainwash.
thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's been brainwashed and programmed and thinking that him and his lineage are the only ones that matter. So throughout his whole life, he's stronger than every other Saiyan he knows. He knows of only three: Raditz, Nappa, and Tarbell. And he's stronger than all three of them. He didn't know about Broly or Kakarot yet. He gets to Earth, and he doesn't get to Earth. Raditz goes to Earth, finds out about Kakarot, the last one, and he dies. Vegeta doesn't give a shit, but he does say in his conversation with Nappa even talks about bringing back the Saiyans. because they talk about Gohan and how Saiyan human blood can like combine and make powerful warriors. And Vegeta himself says, you really want to deal with more Saiyans? Like, he's kind of telling that, but that's going to cause more problems because then they might revolt against us. It's never about Vegeta ruling over somebody. He never even tries to rule over Goku, even when he surpasses him in power. He never tries that. It's about him trying to come to terms with the fact that his whole life was a lie. That just because you're born strong does not mean that somebody else can't come along and be stronger than you. And that's what Goku represents. So throughout the entire series, he sees Goku overcome him, not just with the Kaioken. He went Super Saiyan first. Goku was the first to discover full power Super Saiyan. Vegeta's in fucking awe. He leaves the room of spirit and time with Gohan, and he's like, oh my God, these guys are so strong now. Like he himself is like, he even calls Goku a genius for figuring out that if they stay in that golden-haired form for a long time, they can then upgrade their power. Even he is just humbled and surprised at the fact that Goku has figured this out without even being, like, Goku was only a Saiyan because he was born with, he didn't grow up on planet Vegeta. So by the end of the story, by the time he sees Goku and Kid Buu fighting, that's when he realizes, I've been wrong the whole time. Somebody who is a low-class warrior can get to my level or even surpass me, and that's why he calls Goku number one. When we transition to Dragon Ball Super, then things change because Vegeta is no longer wanting to kill Goku because of his own, let's be honest, small dick energy, his envy, because he has envy for Goku a lot. It's because he sees Goku as a measuring stick. He even tells Frieza that in Resurrection F, like, I need this guy to be alive because I need him to be sort of like, not my rival, but like somebody who I can, you know, we both have the same blood. How strong can we actually get? Then Broly comes around and it rocks both their fucking worlds. This guy has more potential than either one of them. Plus you have Gohan who also has potential. So the whole thing, basically, the entire story of Vegeta is like an example of humility. He comes into the series being super egotistical and arrogant, and the more time he spends with Goku, with Broly, with other people, the less arrogant he becomes, and the more he realizes, I'm just as normal as the rest of these other people. And that, to me, is a great character arc. But when we get to Super now with Ultra Ego, I think people think that he regressed. But like Anand said earlier, it's not really about regression. It's actually the opposite. It's more him understanding. Jordan?
Well, I will say he is regressing in a sense, but he's regressing to a version of Vegeta that we literally got to see for 2 seconds. And that was the day that Raditz and Vegeta survived. The day that he still had every bit of confidence that he was who he thought he was before Planet Vegeta was destroyed. That's who Vegeta's about to become. He's going to become a completely doubtless version of himself. He's basically going to be who he was if he never saw Planet Vegeta blow up. That's basically who he's becoming.
Yeah, which for many of us as humans takes us a long time to get there. You know, I've talked a lot about like Abraham Maslow on videos I've done in the past. I have a video called Goku is Alpha. And in that video, I discussed how, you know, the whole alpha beta thing has been twisted up into like it being a macho thing, when you could have an alpha female too. You can have an alpha trans person, alpha gay person. You don't have to be a straight male to be alpha. That's the biggest BS, toxic BS ever. What it's about is your mentality. Like, how do you view yourself and others? And the truth is about ego and pride is mostly about how you view your true self. And that is coming to terms with who you really are. You look in the mirror and you say, okay, I'm a little chubby. You know, maybe one of my legs is longer than the other. You know, and I don't mean me, I mean like people. Like, okay, I might not be the most handsome person in the world, but I have these traits and I have these good things about myself. And sometimes in psychology, you have to actually like work at that. Because a lot of people who are watching this right now probably have self-esteem issues. And you don't have to go do what Vegeta did, but at some point it does help to kind of remind yourself that you're special, not because you're the prince of all Saiyans. You're special because you're a unique person. And that's what I think Vegeta is becoming. Do you agree, Anand? Am I on the right track here or no?
Yeah, and the fact that Vegeta has been that self-esteem that you mentioned, right? The self-esteem, that arrogance that he's been having,
The
even
real
at
self-esteem.
yeah, the real self-esteem, exactly. The because self-esteem again, it means in two different things according to what you mean by good, so to speak. Because self-esteem, in a good nature, it pushes you to basically improve yourself to greater heights, which acquires good karma balance in your account. He doesn't like acquire more and more sins, which Vegeta has been saying and has been feeling guilty with, has been saying that I've been acquiring more and more bad karma, because why, that is why I'm suffering for these sins and might probably go to hell. Because he's been saying that, like even Piccolo in the Buu arc, he was saying
That's a
that,
big moment. Yeah.
yeah, because Piccolo was basically saying that, you are not you were fighting for just for selfish reasons, so to speak. He was not finding on the right path. That is why you will not go to Goku, because he's been, even though he's been fighting to improve better himself, but in the sense because he's a liberated soul, he's basically instinctively saving others and basically helping others out to
He has
change
pure intentions. Yeah,
Right,
it's
he's
about your
pure-hearted.
intentions.
Whereas,
his
what I love is at the end of Dragon Ball Z, during the fight with Kid Buu, when the halo on Vegeta's head disappears, when they
right,
wish for that is a much bigger moment that
much.
people understand, because that halo disappearing was Toriyama and really the story telling you, okay, this dude's redeemed now. Because if he was evil, that halo would not disappear. But the halo disappears. He got brought back because he's no longer viewed as an evil person from the
Evil
dragon's
person.
Well,
perspective.
he was also
And
necessary. Even if you want to consider what Vegeta does evil, and I think the story does in a sense,
Yes, of
what
course.
what the destroyers do, you could also consider evil, quote
Yep.
unquote. So
Yep. It's a
it
morality
was
debate at
almost
that
like
point.
even though Vegeta had done all those things, he was a necessary part of the universe that needed to exist. So that's the reason that Halo disappeared, because they needed him. You know what I mean? Like
JD, do
they
you have
needed.
any? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, going back off that point, the this is a big contention of debate among a lot of scholars, is that in the East and the Eastern tradition of philosophy, whether
Which
it's
is where
Buddhism,
Dragon Ball's from. Let's
yes,
not forget.
Buddhism,
We have to
Taoism,
remember that.
Shinto, and even Derek Badilla once said, in order to understand Goku's character to a level of degree that the Japanese and those of that culture would understand, you have to. It's a synthesis. It's a synthesis. You have to understand the Shintoism, the Buddhism, the Taoism. They even, some of them do believe in Christianity too. It's a culmination
Yeah,
of
and
those
just to
beliefs.
add, I want to say one thing before you keep going. That does not necessarily mean that you have to read a lot of books on this, because I haven't read tons of books on Buddhism and Taoism, but I have read enough and know enough to understand that even if there's something about Goku you don't understand, just know that there might be a reason for it. It just might not be something you know about, So I just want to tell everybody, it doesn't make you less of a fan to not know, but the more you know, the easier it is to understand his character. That's all I'm saying.
And
It's
going back to the Z thing you guys are talking about with Vegeta's character development up until the Buu Saga fight, that's why I still think that's one of the best moments, is him realizing that Goku speech where he sees that Goku his whole life, no matter how big the threat is, the person he's fighting, whether it's for the sake of the universe, for what the entire universe is coming to an end, Goku only fights to push himself. He doesn't push his will onto others. He doesn't push. It's not like he's trying to absolutely demolish the person he's fighting against. He's just doing it to push his own ceiling, right? And he doesn't see anything. There's nothing more other than that. And so when Vegeta realized that that's the kind of growth mindset that Goku's always had, that's the whole reason why Goku was able to learn from the Kaioken, these godly techniques. Right, he learned because of Goku's mindset, which again, a lot of that borrows from the fact that his character archetype is based off a character who would then become a Buddha, and the Journey to the West story with Son Wukong. But realizing that Goku his whole life, no matter how great a foe, no matter how big a challenge, Goku only sees it as a way to push his own ceiling. That's when I think that was one of the best moments that Toriyama had written, because it was that turning point. And then, like, getting into Super, like you mentioned, you start going through this episode of him having guilt and regret because he realized his whole past, his Z counterpart life, was an illusion. That princely pride that he lashed onto, that he associated with his whole identity, was not the path forward for him. It was not going to lead to that kind of utopic enlightenment kind of like end result to his character. It's the path that Goku had evolved, that growth mindset of just viewing everything as a challenge. You don't like, whether you want to consider that this pure Saiyan nature or not, that's the route to go. And so, going into a little bit of the Buddhism, like, Vegeta believed that all his ancestors' sins, like that karma that they had, right, destroying, pillaging entire civilizations on behalf of an evil emperor, he thought that's on his shoulders, that he has to suffer for that he's going to suffer as a result of all of those past Saiyan sins. But the cool thing about Buddhism is that you still have free will. You still have moral agency around your own personal life. It doesn't matter what your ancestors did 20,000 generations ago.
To simplify, if your parents are dicks, it doesn't mean you have to be a dick too. That's as simple as that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Journey to the West, because that kind of leads into the bombshell that I wanted to drop in this video, which is where Toriyama got the inspiration for Saiyan Pride itself, right? So where Toriyama gets the idea, I've explained to you before that the Saiyan race is based on Sun Wukong as a whole, and where he gets the idea of Saiyan Pride is Sun Wukong himself. Sun Wukong's pride as a warrior is what made him so dangerous. That's the reason that when he became a Buddha, he was known as the victorious fighting Buddha, because what made him so dangerous was the fact that he was instinctually a warrior, right? And what we're seeing from Bardock is basically the perfect example of the basis of what made Sun Wukong so dangerous to not only Heaven and everyone else like within the story, but it's the fact that he's an instinctual creature who's kind of free from the laws of karma in a sense, because he's just acting on his base instincts as an animal, as a creature, and he's doing dangerous things with pure intent. That's kind of like his character arc. And what's really interesting about that is Bardock is sort of like he's a generic example of that aspect of Sun Wukong's personality, the whole pride of a warrior race. He's like what Bardock did is the basis for that idea. But what's really interesting about Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct is they represent two separate points in Sun Wukong's life when he was going down two paths.
We talked about that in the UI video we did together.
Yeah, so the reason that doubt was such an issue for Vegeta is because being doubtless is what made Sun Wukong so dangerous whenever he was the Monkey King, and he was influencing his people to be like him and be this egotistical warrior-driven society. Whenever he was doubtless, that had an effect on his society. Everybody wanted to live by example when they saw him as like this doubtless, uh, you know, um, great king, like equal to heaven. You know what I mean? Like he was very egotistical, while as the Monkey King, and he was doubtless. Like he believed that he was the great sage equal to heaven with all of his heart. He believed that he should be equal to the Jade Emperor, and that he was every bit as good as them because he had no doubt. And that's what made him so dangerous as a character, which is why they're choosing doubt as Vegeta's problem, because
there's
Vegeta
a difference between confidence and ego. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah. And
for example, like a real world example would be somebody who's beta, aka somebody who has doubt or is not confident, is going to make everything about themselves. Whereas somebody who's alpha will elevate others to his level. That's Goku in Z and Vegeta in Z.
Right. A good example of this is whenever Sun Wukong goes to heaven, he's put in charge of watching the horse stables. And they were very strict about how they took care of their horses. But Sun Wukong was like, no, let them run around free. I don't care what you guys think about how these horses should be raised. My opinion as the horse keeper of heaven is that these horses should be able to run around free. And that's like all in a metaphor for how he was kind of an anarchist in a sense, right? Like he wanted, even though he was put in charge of taking care of these creatures, he wanted these creatures to be completely free of the rules of heaven. And that's kind of, that gives you an example of like his ideology, as a character. But with Goku, the reason that faith was such an issue with him, that's also a reference to Sun Wukong in the latter end of the story, because the issue that Sun Wukong has as he's making the journey to the West is faith. Trippy Taka keeps trying to tell him, listen, if you have faith, things will work out. You're upset because I'm telling you not to kill these demons. You're upset because I'm telling you to abandon your old ways and embrace mine. And you're upset because you think I'm wrong and you think that things are going to work out for the worst. But if you embrace and have faith in what I'm trying to tell you, things will work out for the best. So the problems that Goku and Vegeta are having are actually based on the issues that Sun Wukong himself happened to have along his hero's journey. So Toriyama is actually taking inspiration from that even right now within the manga. Like, he's picking these specific themes and these specific topics for these reasons because
you mean the granola arc specifically?
Yeah. Because he's because Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct are essentially the greatest example of what Sun Wukong was while he, like, before he became a Buddha or tamed his ego at all, and what he was after he was completely done. So that's the reason that Toriyama he's kind of using that hero's journey as a blueprint for what he's doing with Goku and Vegeta's character, So like there is some intention there. Like this isn't something that he's just like pulling out of his ass in a sense. Like he's making references to something from the source material. And I basically just wanted to point that out.
Yes.
Right.
Anand, you were going to say something? We're going to wrap up here in a minute. What were you going to say?
Yeah, so basically to just carry forward what Jordan was mentioning about the whole the doubtless part, where did Vegeta exactly come from? Because the influence that Goku has on Vegeta, which of course is talked about a lot, but the deep meaning behind that influence is that because Goku intrinsically is a liberated soul, because the definition of his name is that he's aware of emptiness or void or truth, basically.
The
because
emptiness
in Buddhism,
of his head. Yep.
yeah, basically in Buddhism, the word void means nirvana, so to speak, like, or liberation, so to speak. So because in the mean that he's defined as a person who's aware of the truth, or in Sanskrit mean as tattva darshinaha, means that has that influence, that because a liberated soul, when he carries forward his actions, naturally has influence onto so many people. We've seen that with
the
Bulma.
universe. Yeah, like the
Yeah,
Dragon Balls, like how the Dragon Balls manipulate fate. Yeah, you're exactly
yeah,
right.
with
It's fate
Bulma, with
manipulation.
Krillin, with Roshi, with Piccolo, so many else, and with Vegeta also, because the turning point for his life is that Vegeta, as he met with Goku, because he became more and more purified in that sense, because being a liberated soul, when his association, because in Vedic literature, because when you associate with a pure person, that pure nature sort of rub on to that person who is being associated with. So Vegeta, when he associates more and more in Goku, he gets his thoughts becomes more and more cleaner, in the sense that he was able to realize that what he's been doing was wrong. He should, like, even take Goku's side in a sense. Okay, maybe I should start a family. Let's see how that grows. Because he was saying in the end of the Buu saga is that I tried to also make a family, which to fight for them. But you also did the same thing. But I also had the same issues, because in your case, you did not fight for puffing up for pride or to kill enemies, because you did for bettering yourself in a sense, because it's a pure nature. Vegeta in Z was growing in that nature slowly by slowly, because of the association with Goku. But now, because he's up in that position right now in Dragon Ball Super, because he's associating with the god hierarchy, basically with Beerus and Whis, because they are much higher levels than Goku, in the sense, because they are absolutely, like, Whis is much more liberated in that. Whis is much more liberated in a sense, because he is on Ultra Instinct, or in that state of liberated state, Nirvana 24/7 because his emotions are disconnected from the thoughts which he goes through. And Beerus also is in that is not exactly on that level, but he basically is not controlled emotions. So Vegeta, because he's on that
Guiltless.
level, guiltless basically. His because he was so gripped with the idea of good versus evil or right versus wrong. What I had an idea of being good was what he was thinking as pure evil. But now I am thinking, okay, the moralistic the good, which should not kill unnecessarily, should protect people. That is what his concern. That is giving rise to these guilt feelings. What Vegeta should like basically do right now, what Beerus is at the level of the god, is to rise above the duality of good and evil, because at the liberated stage or at the rise of the demigods, you rise above the discrimination of good or evil, right or wrong, because at the transcendental level, any action what you do is good by its nature. Because as long as Beerus, because Vegeta is following that path, as long as Beerus acts on that detachment level of destroying because it's part of his job, because Zeno
Yep.
has instructed him to do so, he's safe. He's not going to gain karma. If he does something selfish, then yeah, that there's going to be consequences. That consequences came because
Like
he
eating all
ignored
the food at parties.
eating at a full parties, or
That's selfish.
the
Yeah,
punishment
Goku could be seen as a form of karma for Beerus if you really think about it, because like he went after Goku specifically just because he wanted a challenge to feed his ego.
uh,
You know what I mean? So you can kind of look at like Goku's growth and Vegeta's growth and them becoming his rivals as like karma in a sense, because that was him making a selfish decision.
But
He
he
just wanted
still
to
could
go.
kill him whenever he wants to, though.
Yeah, he could, but well, how would Zeno react? You know what I mean? What if Zeno comes knocking? He's like, "Oh, I want to have like another tournament. Where's Goku at?"
Yeah,
You
now
know?
that Goku and Zeno are friends, it's a different story.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right.
I also wanted to mention, going off Jordan's point with the journey to the west, is at the end of the journey,
Goku's got a cosmic Pope mobile. No, go ahead.
well, Goku and the monk. I always forget his name. They both become
Tripitaka.
Pitaka. They both become they both get the Buddha nature. And I've always said that I think that Goku's character, Son Wukong's character, that achieved that form of Buddhahood, it's almost like he's a Bodhisattva, which is those that practice or follow the teachings of the Buddha, but they stay behind before they reach Nirvana to help other people, right? So going off what Anand said about that whole like you stay around people and that positive karma, was it Kagari? It kind of spreads and disperses based off the actions, the karmic actions you do, or how you are as a person. Um, if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, when they did reach India, to get the Buddha Sutras, which are the Buddhist scrolls, the canons of the sayings of the Buddha, I think there's 40 texts. One of them was missing, and I believe it was the Heart Sutra, which is all about emptiness and how that's the key state for Zen, for Eastern Zen and meditation. And it's ironic that was the one that was missing, because the whole point, because the journey made them enlightened. It wasn't just getting the scrolls, right?
Yeah, that's because they didn't necessarily need the Heart Sutra, because they basically found the principles of the Heart Sutra through the journey to the West. Like the journey actually ended up teaching that, like basically the whole point of that is if they didn't make the journey, if somebody tried to go get the Buddha scrolls and they didn't actually make the journey like they were supposed to, they wouldn't get the full idea. That's the reason that it's missing. It's missing because you had to go through the journey to find enlightenment. That's the reason.
And that's
Which
why
is a metaphor for life, by the way.
and Geekdom, if you recall, in the original ending for End to Z, where you see Goku and Oob flying away, and then you have that panel with all the Dragon Balls, and it has like that note from the narrator's note, and it says, "As long as Goku and his friends have the Dragon Balls, the Earth will always be saved." And then in the Kanzenban ending, where he added the whole Nimbus, where Oob's on the Nimbus, he changed that text. He changed it to where he said, not, instead of mentioning the Dragon Balls, he says, "As long as Earth has strong warriors, the Earth will always be saved." What that is, like, why I think he changed that was because of the fact that the Dragon Balls, yes, they are this divine, literary device that allows our characters to manipulate fate or have that good fortune or whatever that case is. It's not the powers of those Dragon Balls that make those people good. It's the actions and the journeys that they go through to become the people that they are. So
Yep.
that's why I
Yep.
like how they changed that
That's
ending, because it shows that the Dragon Balls, they're just a device to carry on events that like they're just
And they can be used by evil people as well. I
Yes.
mean,
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly why I think that the meeting Goku Vegeta was changing fate in a sense, because he was wished back by the Dragon Balls on Namek, because Dende made a specific wish that anyone who was killed by Frieza and his men was basically had to be wished back for life. If it wasn't for Goku's change, if it wasn't for that influence that Goku had on in his life, as he subtly in the beginning and then more directly in the beginning, Vegeta would still be considered as Frieza man in a sense, and he would probably not be even wished back also
Well,
because of that.
at the end of Z, that's the wish that really cements it. The last
Yeah,
wish in the Buu saga.
Goku made that become more apparent as soon as Goku says to Dende, "I trust on Vegeta, just do what he says." That
Yep.
trust, because it is said by a pure person who is liberated. That trust that Goku has in Vegeta bears no doubt for Dende or for the dragon, and that basically made
And-
Vegeta.
And it's pure because Goku doesn't have to do that. Goku would just say, this son of a bitch has been trying to kill me all these years. Fuck him. But no, he's thinking big picture here. Like, we kind of need this guy. Which is the same thing that Vegeta says to Frieza and people forget that scene in Resurrection F is very poignant. Where he says, I need him to be alive or whatever. Like, I need this guy to survive. Even if he's an idiot, I need him to survive. That's a very underrated line. I'm not a big fan of that movie. But that line always, like, it stuck with me. It stuck with me years. I'm like, that's a very un-Vegeta thing to do when we're talking about the Z version. But now he's changed. And notice, and I talked about this in the Majin Vegeta Explained video, during the 7 years that Goku was dead after Cell, that's when Vegeta kind of got, like, domesticated. But the minute Goku came back, it's like all those feelings of insecurity came back into Vegeta. Like, he sees this guy and he's like, oh, this son, like in his head he's like, this son, I'm gonna play nice, but I really don't like this guy. And then that's why later on he's like, how could you have Super Saiyan 3 and not tell me? Like, how could you play with me like that? Like, and you see, even before that, he sees him against Yakon, and that's when he decides to do the Babidi thing. People also misunderstand that too, and that video explains everything. But anyways, we've gone like for over 45 minutes, yo. Hopefully everybody learned something, and I really appreciate y'all stopping by to talk about this topic because it's a good topic. I think people to think a little bit more when they watch this show or read the manga. So thank you, Jordan, Anand, JD. Yeah, what?
Yeah, just one last part, because people have been like, I've just noticed on Twitter, people are saying that, why you're just thinking so deep about Dragon Ball, why you're connecting religion for Dragon Ball.
People who say that, bro. Maybe I'm gonna quote Sean Schemmel. Sean Schemmel once told me, he goes, anytime somebody says that you're overthinking it, ask them if they're underthinking it. And he's right. And by the way, he's a Buddhist, so that should tell you something.
And Dragon Ball is a piece of literature. I think when people are reading the story, they just see pictures like, oh, it has to be at the level of a child because it's just pictures and not words or very little words. No, it's a piece of literature. There's literary criticism. There's literary theories that go into play. Obviously, the story has themes. It has characters. It has character developments, conflicts.
But also, if you're into this franchise, you like the comedy and the fights, cool. I have no problem with that, but don't sit here and tell me how to enjoy my shit. Like, if I want to look into this, I can look into it. Same thing goes with Avengers Endgame. Same thing goes with movies like Pulp Fiction. You can watch Pulp Fiction for 2.5 hours and be entertained, or you can watch it a billion times like I have and dissect everything. Marcellus Wallace's band-aid on the back of his head, the briefcase. That's just how things are, bro. Some people like things more than others, and I happen to like Dragon Ball a lot, so I want to learn as much about it as I can. Even if it's not what you like, that's okay. Like, that's all right. I just don't like people trying to take the fun out of it for others, There's a couple of people in the fandom who are like, I don't really understand power scaling. Okay, that's cool, but some people like that. Oh, it's ruining their enjoyment of the show. That's their problem. Enjoy whatever you want. So that's my message.
Exactly, because they should also know, like, people give shit to Toriyama because he forgets a lot of stuff. but people should recognize
Talk
that
about an empty head.
but the thing is that in Japan, the amount of respect for culture and the richness for the respect for the culture and philosophy there, and the fact that Toriyama actually went to China and India to learn about this, to write Dragon Ball, should know that he thought a lot about when it comes to philosophy and the kind of message that he wants to send fans to the readers of for the readers of Dragon Ball, because he's very it's basically he's like a scholar for philosophy in that sense, because he's
Yeah,
traveled all.
he wanted to tell us a story similar to Journey to the West, but making a story about fighting was much more profitable.
That was Yamamoto's, not Yamamoto. I'm
He even
sorry.
said that was like ripping off a
Torishima.
Band-Aid when he even
Torishima,
said he said that was like ripping off a Band-Aid when I did it. You know, he was like, I
right.
was very hesitant to do it, but when I did it, I felt much better about it. Like, and he compensates for that to this day. He's still trying to tell the story he wants, but he's like balancing that with giving us an entertaining product. So people just need to like consider that.
And he said in an interview that one of the editors said this has the early Dragon Ball had a very Journey to the West feel. And he's like, yeah, I actually originally was going to have Bulma and Goku collect the Dragon Balls, and the story would have ended. What are the Dragon Balls representing? The Buddha Sutras from Journey to the West. Again, so it's just upsetting to see when people kind of just disregard those things. It's like, just because Dragon Ball has evolved into a this martial arts fighting show doesn't mean that it's the fighting and that the themes behind the fighting, why they fight, why they grow, isn't still related to. Because even if you're just a martial arts, just go talk to anyone who's ever done martial arts, and they'll tell you it's very mental. There's a lot of mental stuff that goes on with being a fighter. It's not all about how you lift your muscles. It's also about how you think, and that goes back to the philosophy that influenced Kung Fu, right? The way of the samurai. That's Zen Buddhism that came from China. And then China got that from India. So again, it's just historical. There's historical evidence for that, you know?
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, thanks again. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.